What a flying start to the Euros it has been. Rach, let's immediately come to you, mate. You're obviously in and amongst the action. You're in Switzerland. You're effectively in a kind of Swiss oven at the moment. Can you talk us through the weather conditions and also how are things going out there? How was the first day for you, mate?
Yes, it's very warm. I'm being assured that it's meant to cool down as the week goes on, but it feels a bit like England, where no one has really bothered to invest in any air conditioning on public transport or anything like that. So definitely feeling the heat, and feeling the heat right up until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, when it was, I think when the match finished, it was still 28 degrees. It was 30 degrees at 9 o'clock when it kicked off. So the heat is pretty heavy. And something else to contend with on top of media duties and everything else.
I was going to say, how are you coping with it? I think it's a lot when you're trying to move from location to location. Obviously, like, some of the pitches are in the sun at the start of the games. Like, how are people like coping out there? Just like copious amounts of beers and water and like sunscreen. How is everyone?
Well, luckily, the one free thing that UEFA has provided to media is water, which I'm quite disappointed about, because at the Euros in England, we were given a small bag with a sandwich and a packet of crisps in it, because we're spending kind of maybe from 5, 6 o'clock until midnight at these games. But no,
also a lot of money to be there.
Everything has to be paid for. It's like 4 francs for a cup of tea in the media room, so 8.50 for a sandwich. So yeah, it's... At least there's water. I don't know how many bottles of water I drank yesterday, but that was one thing they were handing out to the media around the ground, was some water, thankfully, and to all the volunteers and the staff and the ball kids and everything else. So, and they have changed the rules as well. You're allowed to bring bottles, I think, up to 500 millilitres. They're very proud of the fact that you can drink the water from the taps in the stadium, because the water here is so good and clean. So there's that, at least. So I think lots of hydration and sun cream.
Good. Well, can you just stay safe, mate? Because obviously it's the first day and there's so many more days yet to come. So you can't have you burning out, getting heat stroke, sunstroke and the rest of it. So keep your lovely Irish skin out of that weather, please. Right, talk to us about the opening ceremony then, because obviously it was a bit of a weird one. We had the Iceland-Finland game, and then we had the opening ceremony coming in, the second game at 8 p.m. Rach, obviously you were there, you saw it, I saw it on TV. What did you kind of make of it? It was I thought it was nice. I thought it was really nice. It kind of reflected the tournament's theme, the summit of emotions, massive crowd there, like a sea of red. It looked like quite a jubilant kind of start to things. I don't think it was the best opening ceremony that I've ever seen, but it was nice.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good description. I think it was probably an opening ceremony made for TV, or for people kind of sitting higher up in the stands, because from pitch side, it was a bit like, I don't really know what's going on. And then when the floaty balloon trophy came in, I thought they were like seashells or some sort of sea creature. I couldn't figure out what it was until I saw pictures afterwards of it from above, and I was like, oh, obviously it's a trophy. So yeah, there was, people very jubilantly dancing around with massive poles, that candlesticks. I don't know. There was a Beauty and the Beast kind of candelabra vibe about it. But yeah, probably missing a few fireworks.
Yes.
Yeah, basically. The emotion side of things, do you know what? Actually, I got some lovely photos of not just Lia Volti, but Ada Hegerberg, both captains, looking especially emotional during their national anthems. The Swiss national anthem was spine-tingling. The crowd really got behind that, but both captains visibly with tears in their eyes and looking very emotional would seem quite appropriate, given the tagline is Summit of Emotions. So I think a wonderful moment always to see a captain lead their team out at a home tournament, because not many players get to do that, so that's always quite a special moment. So that was evidently emotional, and Ada Hegerberg as well, leading her team out at a major tournament, was pretty special for her, I imagine. And given she had that time away from the national team when she didn't feel that Norway was doing enough for women's football, and she took herself out of contention, and now she's back and got a goal, her 50th goal as well. So, so there was lots of kind of little moments that made it quite an emotional game, I think, for both.
Oh, 100%. You can see the emotion on her face. Sort of the camera very much zoomed in to Leah Volti as she kind of came out. And I remember, I mean, we were fortunate enough to go and speak to her in November when she was just in the sort of build-up moment. She was doing, like we said in the last pod, like doing so much for the Swiss Tourism Board, kind of promoting all the various things that were going to be going down the tournament. And she was saying like how emotional that was going to be. Obviously, she's spoken to Leah about that moment that you kind of lead your team out in a home Euros and kind of like the pressure that's on your shoulders, but also that need to stay really cool and calm and composed. Like it's not about kind of letting that emotion overcome you. It's about sort of reining it in and making sure that you deliver the best leadership for the squad in those moments. Obviously they're all feeling the pressure, so yeah, that was really lovely to kind of see that moment for her as well. So yeah, I mean, obviously what a kind of enormous moment for her to come out to, sell-out crowd cheering them on. Ticket sales have surpassed those of Euro 2022 even before the ball was kicked, which I do find like a little bit, I did have to kind of fact check this one a little bit.
Yeah, that one blew my mind.
It didn't feel that was possible. I think given like the capacity situation with some of the Swiss stadiums that are playing host to some of the games, and sort of you look at Old Trafford being used, and you look at the Brighton and Hove Albion stadium being
Sheffield.
used, and then the Wembley Stadium for all of those massive capacity Premier League stadiums, and Switzerland doesn't ever. I don't understand how that is kind of possible.
So I was trying to work that out, and I think it was the games at like in the Manchester grounds in Lee and in the Academy Stadium, now Joy Stadium, and Brentford was 24,000 maybe capacity. I think Rotherham was another kind of lower capacity, so perhaps those ones, they weren't always sold out. I remember there was kind of talk around the fact that Lee and the Academy Stadium weren't sold out, which was kind of a bit shit when they were already low capacity. So I think here, despite there being lower capacity, they've sold a lot of the tickets of a 20,000 seater or whatever that might be. So that must be what it is. There's been some numbers coming out. I think Germany topping the ticket sales at 60,000 tickets, England in second at 40,000 tickets. So I think 5,000 tickets have been sold to Americans. So a good spread of people. And yeah, you touched on the crowd there yesterday. I was really intrigued to see how the Swiss crowd got behind the team. And while there was a lot of people buzzing around the stadium outside, quite an unusual stadium because it had like a co-op and it had like a sports shop and it had like shops kind of attached to the outside of it. So when I went wandering around trying to get some atmosphere, everyone was just like sitting on the footpath, just chatting or like going in shopping. There was no kind of atmosphere outside the stadium, and maybe that was because they were coming from the fan zone and they did do a Swiss march, which looked incredible. But inside the stadium, completely different story when the game started, and they were behind every single kick of the ball. So that was really cool to see, and some really interesting chants that I had to get some Swiss people to translate for me because it sounded like they were chanting hot cheese, which apparently is not what they were saying. It was saying Hop Suisse, which is up Switzerland, but
okay,
when the crowd are doing it sounds like they're shouting fondue. Well, hot cheese. I was kind of sat there for a while, like, what is it?
In their own
way.
What are they saying? I did see some lovely footage of the Swiss fans. It looked like they were sort of in like a train arches, but they were obviously, we'll get into the game itself, but like the celebrations around some of the moments in the game were absolutely huge, and there was just like a sea of red everywhere. I mean, was it difficult to differentiate the Swiss fans and the Norway fans at points? I mean, how did that? It must have just looked like everyone was on the same team, surely.
Yeah, so when I was going around trying to get photos of fans, you'd just suddenly see like, oh, there's a little blue square in the middle of that red. You're Norwegian. So yeah, they were actually quite tricky to pick out because obviously a lot of people were wearing both home shirts. So yeah, that was a little bit, every so often you might see a head pop up with like a Norwegian flag or cross in the middle. So but a good amount of them down the far end, making a little bit of noise, but absolutely drowned out by the Swiss fans. That march, that shot you were talking about, really reminded me of when Arsenal fans do it from the Tollington, and they're underneath the arch outside the Emirates. It had that kind of
with
vibe about it because it really makes it loud. Yeah. And the cowbells, the cowbells, unreal.
Really, I mean, the noise, you could see that, you could hear the noise of it from the telly, so it must have been absolutely like phenomenal, like during the actual stadium. And I think it looked like quite a close knit stadium. It looked like sort of like very contained, like bowl like. So I can imagine like nice. The reverberations would have been great. Okay, cool. Let's get stuck into the game itself then. We'll start with the Switzerland-Norway one. Despite it not being the first opening game. We
was game
can't talk
one.
about that anymore. What were your thoughts on Switzerland? Because I thought first half, absolutely phenomenal. It was everything the crowd wanted. They obviously had the weight of expectations going into the tournament as the tournament hosts. I think they were dominant. I think they were on the front foot. I thought they took the game to Norway, and I thought Norway looked a little bit lost, and it just felt like another story, another narrative around Norway just not doing anything that they're expected to do given the calibre of players. I mean, there were so many chances I think that Switzerland could have had to even put the game to bed early doors had they been a little bit more clinical. But yeah, I mean, Rach, what did you think?
Switzerland really impressed me. I was, you could see they were super up for it. I think the way I look at it is Switzerland impressed and made me feel like they could get out of the group. Norway, definitely disappointed, will probably still top the group, but underwhelming, I think. I thought the Swiss game plan was excellent. They were playing a back three, Norway, and Switzerland were just absolutely dominating the wings and capitalising on that every single time. And surprising how long it took Norway to kind of adjust to that. And I don't know, it's just unusual when you're looking at a Caroline Graham-Hansen, a Guro Reiten, a Frida Monum, and Monum at times out in the wing, and you're just like, what? I don't understand whether the use of those players, where you're getting the best out of those players. It doesn't make sense. And a lot of people I saw talking about Gemma Granger and maybe she's this and maybe she's that, and I'm like, actually the common denominator here of Norway struggling at major tournaments are the players. At the end of the day, there has to be some of that. Why does it work for a club and not for country? Why aren't they getting the best? Maybe not always playing players in the right positions perhaps. And I don't know, just little things, sloppy passes, stuff you're just not used to seeing from those players, which was quite surprising. But I was super impressed with Switzerland. There was no kind of sign of nerves. They didn't look to be, overwhelmed by the fact that they were playing their first game, the fact that they were arguably playing the hardest game of their group first, which can understandably make you a little bit nervous. But no, I was super impressed with the way they came out. I actually thought, like you said, they deserved to probably go in a little bit more higher up at half time. And look, I know that Norway had opportunities to put the game to bed and make it 3-1, but equally so too did Switzerland, and there was a triple chance at the end where I don't know how the ball stayed out. But yeah, I don't know if overwhelmed is the right way of describing it, given I thought Norway were underwhelming, but I was super impressed, especially Reuteler, who got player of the match for Switzerland. She was kind of at the heart of everything good they did.
100%. And I think going into that game, obviously there were a few doubts over about how well they were going to do. Obviously Ramona Bachmann getting the ACL injury, and then Leah Volti obviously coming back, and people sort of wondering whether she was going to be at full fitness. But I thought she had an absolutely outstanding game, and it kind of felt like it was almost unlucky. I think they were very much unlucky not to walk away with more points, and get those initial points on the board. And I think Pia Sundhage after the game was saying, we didn't win the game. There's such a small difference between being successful and unsuccessful. Very disappointed, but tomorrow it's important we look at the performance and take confidence from that. And I think that's really, really fair.
Yeah. And I think as well, when you look at kind of the timings of the goals, I think the way the first and second goal came was almost like a 1-2 punch, right? So I thought Switzerland had done so well in the first half. Then there was that superb header from Ada Hegerberg, who came in like a freight train into that box for the header, and nearly put it through the back of the net, rising up for the corner, what she does best. And that was an absolutely superb goal. And it rocked Switzerland a little bit, and then suddenly 4 minutes later, they get the penalty. They get the own goal, I should say. And that was an absolute killer, because there was nothing really that Sierli could do. She had Hegerberg on her shoulder. It reminded me a bit of the Laura Bassett goal, where you're like, I have to put something on this, otherwise she's going to score. And 9 times out of 10,
either way, it was going in the back of net, whether she did it or whether it was Hegerberg. It was almost kind of inevitable, the position of the ball. It was such a well driven in ball. I mean, credit to Caroline Graham-Hansen, because his delivery was absolutely pinpoint perfect, but yeah, I mean, like you said, it did just feel, you could see how disappointed she was in that moment, and kind of, and the worst thing is actually that the score ended 2-1, and that was the goal that changed sort of whether that was going to be a great game for them, a great start, and now it being a loss and registered as a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, and I feel like after that goal then Norway did everything they could to kind of slow the game down, disrupt the game, not let any kind of rhythm, Switzerland find any kind of rhythm, whether it was like, you know, time wasting, fouls, dropping the ball when you're trying to take a throw in, pretending like you can't hear when you're being subbed off, or you know, almost refusing to leave the pitch at one point. I think it was Vilde-Boe Risa, you know, stuff like that. It was really disruptive. Then you had the two penalty situations where Norway got the penalty because I can't remember who it was, but suddenly thought she was playing like handball or something, and did the most obvious handball. It was like Rachel Williams-esque when she played for Birmingham against Arsenal. She kind of rose up in the air like she was Superman. So yeah, that was, you know, a penalty that had to go to VAR. So that was a slow process. Hegerberg misses. They go down the other end. They get a penalty shout. That takes bloody ages, and you have to wait for VAR. It's overturned. Then we've got a bloody cooling break after what felt like 30 seconds of action in the last 10 minutes, which kind of disrupted the game even more. Then you were having substitutes. Switzerland just couldn't find their rhythm until maybe the final, arguably maybe 5 minutes plus injury time. They started really going, okay, we really have to push here. And they had like a triple opportunity. I don't know how it didn't go in the back of the net, but it was exciting. It was a lot of chaos. It kind of delivered as an opening game in that respect. But I do really feel for Switzerland because I thought they probably deserved something out of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, it was, like you said there, Rach, there were so many dramatic moments that happened on that first day. I mean, we had a red card in the Iceland-Finland game. We had the penalty decisions. We had an own goal taking place. We had the sea of fans. We had the opening ceremony. It felt like a day that was jam-packed full of weird and wonderful, wild things, like where else but women's football. But I mean, let's talk a little bit then about Norway, because once again, we're sort of saying, you know, given the calibre of talent they have, again, not delivering, not up to standard. And it kind of felt like they were lucky to kind of scrape that 2-1. Like fortune was on their side. Lovely, obviously, to see Ada Hegerberg back, scoring that incredible friggin' header. I mean, what a way to mark your 50th goal for Norway, and obviously a defining goal as well that helped them secure that first win and get those points. But do we now feel like actually this is an Ada Hegerberg who, back to the international stage, back to international football, do we feel like that this is actually where she's going to shine and kind of make up, I suppose, for the, you know, the way that she had to remove herself from football before? This is her back and sort of better than ever, despite obviously the penalty miss. Not ideal.
Yeah, the penalty miss wasn't ideal. I mean, I hope so. I think Norway absolutely need players like that who can come up in key moments. You know, she hasn't necessarily had the best run of form with the international team of late, and that, I kind of touched on that in the last episode about how some in the press in Norway were kind of questioning her starting, and so that felt a little bit like a vindication. You know, arguably having a hand in both goals, she may not have scored the second, but she caused the second. You know, had she gotten that penalty, I really feel like that would have been a real stamp, a real marker of her, I'm back now. So we'll see in the next couple of games. You know, I think it was a superb goal that should give her a lot of confidence, and hopefully she can just forget that penalty miss.
100%. And I think you have to look at sort of Norway's, I suppose, track record in these competitions. They've gone out in the group stages of the last 2 Euros. Do we think actually success for them would be actually just making it out of the group stages? Obviously, this first game now, getting that initial win definitely helps. Another win probably secures their place. Yeah, I mean, they've got to use that as a marker of success, which feels like a really low bar. Again, given the talent that they have, just getting out.
Yeah, I know, but they have to get out of this group. If they don't get out of this group, like this group of all groups in this tournament, if they don't get out of this one, serious looking needs to be done. I think, yeah, getting out of the group is success. It very much depends on who they could meet, you know, and if our predictions are right, which they very often aren't in major tournaments, because there's always kind of a spanner thrown in the works at times. But they could meet Italy, and I think Italy could be difficult for them. So, you know, arguably they probably have an easier side of the draw, which is feel like an unfair thing to say in this tournament when everyone's stepping up so much. But realistically, this is their opportunity to go further. Yesterday they got the win. That's the main thing. Performance didn't massively inspire, but if they can improve, they played one of the tougher teams, I guess, in their group. Iceland, again, we're going to get onto that, didn't massively inspire, but at the same time, Finland could maybe pose some threats that they didn't think they'd have to worry too much about. So it really does depend on how they turn out against the next two teams, and I guess they will draw a lot from the fact that they won the game. That is the main thing. They were absolutely fucking delighted yesterday. You could see it in the team, absolutely delighted. Like, they were down celebrating with the fans, every single player, like hugging each other, high fives. Like, they were, it felt like they, every time they got a goal or did something really positive, they came together and it was a real like, come on now, we've got this, let's go, like, next step, let's go on, let's move, win this game. And, you know, I'm sure as a collective they'll come together and be like, right, tick, we've got the first 3 points, next one, got to get this win, and try and maybe stay in their bubble and ignore the noise outside.
Yeah, let's wait and see what the second game brings. All right, Rach, we've dissected the second game. Let's have a look at the first game. Iceland losing to Finland 1-0. We didn't really call this. We thought that it was going to be an Iceland win. First game of the tournament kicked off a few hours before the host took on Norway. Katarina Kasala scored a great goal and was the busiest player on the pitch. Iceland goalkeeper Cecilia Runnersdottir made her Euros debut after being named Serie A Goalkeeper of the Year. She made some absolutely outstanding saves. Rach, I understand that Soph was at this game. Obviously, you two you're splitting off into different directions.
No, she wasn't at the game. She was in Basel watching the game. So that she was then ready for the next game. So she was writing a report for this for The Guardian. So really awkward, because we get like a UEFA stream in the media room, and the stream was terrible. It was really glitchy. It was like watching it at like 85% speed, and like the frames kept glitching. It was very odd. So I think, yeah, she also had it up on her computer screen so she could watch it properly. That's so we hadn't split necessarily, but I was listening. Well, I put my headphones in on the train from Zurich to listen to this game, and about 2 minutes in, 2 Swiss girls sitting next to me started talking to me about, you know, what do I do and how do I get to go to watch the Euros and what my job is. They're both in Swiss shirts. They were off to the game as well. So I ended up spending the rest of the train journey chatting to them about working in women's football and the various things that I've done, which was really nice, and their English was amazing as well. So yeah, they're on their school holidays from next week, and they're going to be getting to go to numerous games. So shout out to them if they do end up listening to this episode. So yeah, sadly I didn't actually listen to as much of the game as I wanted to, but I caught it when the second half, when I got into the ground, and it definitely felt like Finland started better than maybe everyone was expecting. It felt like a proper opening match, despite it being technically game 2, like a feisty, physical affair. And maybe a bit like Norway in that in Iceland did not impress and kind of disappointed a little bit, you know. And I do think it swayed the momentum swayed between the two teams at times, and that 2 yellow cards. When I saw that a player had been sent off, I immediately thought it was the player who'd gotten booked. This is harsh. Like 3 minutes into the game, one of Finland's central defenders got booked, which felt like a very early booking for the very, very first game for something that I don't think was that bad of a challenge. I think maybe it was a pullback, for example. But they kept saying, oh God, now that it was Nystrom, she's going to have to be careful now. She's got, you know, basically the whole game where she has to play on a yellow card. So when I saw, red card, I was like, she ended up getting, no, it wasn't her. It was another player who got 2 yellow cards in the space of 7 minutes. So that's definitely definitely a game to forget for her. But definitely turned it on its head a little bit. Anton's Dottir, that's who it was. 2 yellow cards in the space of 7 minutes. So not ideal.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I was going to say, obviously Iceland going down to 10 players, not ideal for them. And I think obviously it did impact, I think, how they were able to show up in the game. But I think when you actually look at that, that second yellow stamping on Summanen's ankle, that let's not start the Euros that way, shall we? Yeah, that kind of feels like an over aggressive and unnecessary thing to take place. But I think I've got to agree with you. I think I did find the game very evenly balanced. I think either one of them probably could have won it, but I think probably the right result was Finland scraping the win. Even just looking at some of the stats here, they're so finely balanced. 56% for Finland, 44% Iceland, similar level of passes accuracy. It just felt like you couldn't really call it, and I think we said that before the game, but I think we basically thought that Finland might walk away with the points. No, Iceland might walk away with the points, but
that was Finland's first win in a Euros in like 16 years or something.
That's absolutely huge.
Thinking Iceland were going to win it wasn't that crazy.
That is, 16 years.
I mean, that sounds terrible. 4 Euros. Do you know what I mean? It sounds easier when you do it within the actual cycle. But when you say, it's like, okay, this is like a pet peeve, right? Slightly off track. But you know when like the FA Cup Instagram goes, this team hasn't lost an FA Cup game in 397 days. And you're like, yeah, but they haven't played the FA Cup the whole way through the year. There's been like 6 months of no FA Cup. I haven't lost an FA Cup game, if that's what we're doing. Like, do you know what I mean? It's
I like those scaremongery stats.
Saying like 16 years sounds like insane when actually it's probably just 4 Euros, 4 tournaments, which sounds like slightly less terrible.
I think we could always count on you to be the voice of reason on that one, so thank you for giving some kind of context to that. Okay, Rach, let's talk about the big games happening tonight. We've got Belgium, Italy, Spain, Portugal. I am super, super excited to see Spain start their Euros campaign. It does feel like they're obviously going to be the ones to watch, and I'm just so excited to see how they approach that first game, kind of who's going to be chosen, who's going to be in the starting 11, how they're going to set up, like what their approach is. And I think obviously it's the first time we've kind of seen them in a major international tournament since the Women's World Cup, and things still haven't been resolved from that, and it kind of feels like now is their chance to kind of get back into an international tournament and kind of show everyone what they're about again. But I mean, Rach, this has got to be the game that you're most looking forward to this evening. 8:00, everyone's going to be there.
Yeah, I will be at that game. 9:00 for us here, just a reminder. So I got home at 2:00 last night in the morning. So yeah, like I think it's going to be an exciting game. I worry that it's going to be a high score, and I hope it's not. I hope Portugal turn up and can be really disciplined and defensively sound as much as they can. For me, I think the Italy-Belgium game, not that it's more exciting, but like we kind of all feel Spain's going to top the group. So it's the who's coming in second. And that game, Italy-Belgium, is going to give us a real idea of where these two teams are at in this tournament. Are Italy going to turn up? Are Belgium going to do something that no one's really expecting and get one over on the Italian? So for me, that game will start to give a bit of an indicator as to who might come second in this group. If Spain beat Portugal, it's going to be probably between those two teams potentially. So both exciting games. And like you say, intrigued to see who gets the nod for Spain and whether they're going to, I hope not, put Bonmati on the pitch.
Well, I mean, like you said there, Rach, it does feel like Spain are probably going to top the group unless something particularly drastic goes wrong. We mentioned in the previous pod that England could face Spain in the semi-finals if they both win their groups. Rach, obviously, Soph being the absolute women's football guru, legend, icon of data, knowledge and insight, has predicted that Spain and England are going to be in the final. Soph thinks that England will finish second in Group D, and that's how they will reach that position. I mean,
where is this coming from? That's very impressive. How did you get inside her mind? Did she write that for something? Then I haven't read it.
Well, I mean, when you're third wheel for long enough, I think you just have that level of insight and knowledge. Rach, I mean, it doesn't hurt to like pick up the phone and just check in and see how Soph's doing. Obviously, you're in different cities, so just
we're not. She's outside. We're not in different cities. We're together.
Well, me and Soph we've been very close this tournament so far. So yeah, check in with her and find out how she's doing. No, we actually found out from her article in The Guardian.
Sure.
Obviously, really, really good news that Bonmati has joined up with the Spain squad after her treatment for viral meningitis. I think it's probably too soon for her to be in the starting 11 today. Obviously,
with Spain,
viral meningitis is quite a serious thing to have to bounce back from. I don't think it's probably that helpful either that it's like 45,000 degrees over in Switzerland. It can't be that nice to kind of deal with an infection like that and also have to contemplate dealing with that in the hot weather. But like you said, Rach, I mean, Spain obviously renowned for player welfare, mental well-being and looking after players' health. So we can only imagine actually that there is a possibility that she does actually play.
Thing is, like, we will never be told like the ins and outs of things, and how decisions are made and all that kind of stuff. I just hope in those situations that the people who are making the decision as to whether someone should join back up with their team is perhaps, an independent decision maker. When you have these like HIA assessments and stuff in rugby, and look, I'm not really au fait with rugby, so I could get this wrong, but I feel like the person kind of making that decision is a third party person that isn't kind of, leaning towards one side or the other or thinking we really need this player on the pitch. So I'd be intrigued to know how those decisions come about. Obviously there's very good medical staff in and around the teams now, but you kind of think like, obviously they'll put player welfare at the heart of it, but ultimately they're part of the team and they want the team to be successful. So I'd be intrigued how those decisions are made, but we're not medical experts. Maybe it was a mild case of viral meningitis, if that exists. But for me, anything that puts you in a hospital makes me wonder whether you're quite ready to play a match kind of 4 days later.
100%. And I think I'd maybe understand them trying to speed up the recovery process had it not been for the fact that they have a absolute stellar stacked squad of world-class elite talented players who could, any one of them, fill a position and do an incredible job. So yeah, I'm just hoping they approach this sensibly, which is a fucking big ask actually for the Spain's women national team federation.